Okay. Weird. Okay. Please bear with me. We will have to speed up a little, even though there's plenty of things to cover, but I want to give John more room for XSLT because XSLT is a whole different thing, and you have seen a lot of XPath already. So I want to just stress, there are a lot of examples that you can try, but I will just now show you what it does. Um, but oh, my timer is gone. Oh, okay. Uh, no, I will just set a timer here. It's fine. Timers. 15 minutes. What do you think? Go. Everybody with me? Okay. XQuery. The one of the nicest thing that will happen is that the context item is now leveraged or elevated to context value that says that you can have more than one item in there if you need that. Previously, it had to be a single thing, single item. And there's also that you can now set a default value for the context item. Let's think that I usually the context item is declared as external, as you can see also above here. And now you can also say, okay, if there is no external context value, then use this, and you can have a document in there or something else, which is really helpful if you want to do testing, for instance. Yeah. Okay. Context number 2. So we know there are some namespaces that you can use without declaring them, and then there's some that you can't use without declaring them. And you have to, every time you have to remember what was the array and map, and every time I use the XSLT, the XQuery 3 fiddle, I'm scrambling to get those all right. And so additionally to XSFN and R, you will now have XSFN R map, array, and math. Yeah, there's a question. What? Output is in there. I've just forgot it. Yeah, there it is. I didn't forget it. So yeah, this is the other one yeah, now you can just declare options like output method without declaring the namespace that everybody is using anyways, and you can't even override. Um, yeah, so this is also something new. You can now declare your own custom types. So if you want to have a type that names binary that is a union of XS base 64 binary and XS hex binary, you can declare it. There's a new type that you can declare, and that is an enum type. An enum is any set of strings. So keep that in mind. You can only use strings here, but this will make sure that there's only a certain set of strings coming your way, which you can then map to any other value if you want in a map, if you need a different item. So yeah. There's a type called a record. You heard this before. There's the term record was flowing around, and you can declare them if you're using XQuery, not XPath, but XQuery. In XPath, you can only use the predefined ones, but this is also a debate currently under scrutiny. I'm not sure if we will get them or not, but it would be beneficial, I think, to be able to refer to built-in types. Here, this is a record that has a height a decimal and width a decimal, but this means that you will have a map of a certain shape. This is what it actually means. It's just a map. It's a glorified map. And you can, next question is, yeah, but what if I want to have one that you can extend? Yes, you can have one that is extended. There's a shorthand, first shorthand to declare record my rectangle, okay? And then you can also with an asterisk at the end or anywhere in this definition, you can say, okay, additional properties are allowed. But if you don't do that, then there's only those 2 keys in there ever. Otherwise, it is not an instance of this record. which makes a lot of type checks really nice in functions, for instance. So you want to make sure you get a map that has only those two keys, or you want to have a check that checks, okay, it has to have at least those two keys. So this is now possible. There was a question, I think. Yeah, please short.
Yes.
We don't have time. Yeah, come on.
Yeah. So is the star meaning, for example, if I have an 8 that is not a decimal, is it accepted or
no?
Okay.
Okay. The question was, could I now have a second height that is of type item? And that's not possible because you can. It is a map and it can only have one key.
It's a map.
Yeah, it's still a map.
Because record in some language are not just doing that.
Yeah, but in this case, we did this because we wanted to keep the breaking change as small as possible, and J nodes are already breaking enough. Do you?
Yes, I have one point. Why is it called declare record and not declare map?
Why is it not called declare record? Why is it called declare record and not declare map? Because it's a special type of map. This is why. And to distinguish this, this has to be the case. Okay, these new records also now have a thing called methods. And so you can reference yourself using the it's not an object because it does not have private properties. I tried hard. There is no private properties, so it's not an object, and you can always put in anything. So override it. It's helping you keeping stuff local and reason about your code a little differently. To have like a rectangle is this data structure that can operate on itself. Okay. Then you can also, methods can also be focus functions. I said focus functions. And there's also something hidden in there. If you spot it, please raise your hand now. No, self, yeah, but yes. That too. Yeah, the multiplication operator is a different one. This is also now possible. There's a certain set of those that you can now use interchangeably. Okay.
Have any different semantic meaning, or is it semantically identical?
There's some. The question was if there's semantic difference in those two. No, you can use them interchangeably. There is a possibility to have nicer, distinct. Like if you in your code base use this mathematical times operator, then you can be sure that all the asterisks have a different meaning. So that might be a takeaway. Okay. I like this one a lot, and that is that if you now throw an error, raise an error in your code, and you catch it, then there is a new property in the error that is bound, and that is that you get a map with all of the things that usually would be separate items. So for re-throwing or re-raising errors, that is beautiful. And this is how it looked like. You would have the code, the description, the value, line number, column number, module, and there's something else. There's stack trace. If it's available, then there's a stack trace that you can use. I don't know off the top of my head. I will come back to you. I don't know, but it's also lazy if you don't retrieve it, then it will not be built because it's too expensive. Okay, that much I know. Okay. Finally, there is finally keyword that you can use that you can then do something like logging. The one thing that you have to keep in mind is that this can never return anything. So finally, you can only use for messaging, and this will never be part of the return. I have no idea. Well, the question was, what happens if an error is raised in the finally? And actually, the In my testing, it was that the code didn't run because I was returning something in finally. So that's the error that you will get, but everything else is just swallowed, right? So if you're trying to return something, then your code will not run, and that's a static error. And if everything else will just be swallowed. That would be my short answer.
Can we message the error description in finally?
The question was, can we use do we have access to the error description in the finally in the message? And I think no. But I'm not sure. I haven't tried that.
There is an error.
There might not be an error. Yeah, that's true. Okay. That will be already XSLT, which gives us the chance for one tutorial. Now, I will show you all the tutorials and you say which one you want to see. Maybe this one is actually really important. What I didn't say yet, there is, I actually forgot several things to tell you, but this one is important is you see that body here is using a QName literal that you can use now. And that is important because there is now this construct here, element diff could now mean with an empty element here, element diff. This could now mean something different than it used to be. So you now have to write element diff. This is also one of the breaking changes coming with XQuery 4.
We have to write that to put it in the default namespace.
You have to use a QName literal instead of a literal. Yes, the hash is new. I know it does work still. I know, I don't know why it shouldn't. But I tried it as well. It shouldn't. I don't know. That was like a lot of discussion was centered around this. So this, if you write element diff and this, that could mean that divide by empty map. So it's an ambiguity in the syntax. Yeah. And so, yeah. Okay, 3 minutes.
So the hash is just to work around an ambiguity that's been introduced. Yes.
You could say that. Was it just introduced to work around an ambiguity? Yes, but no. Now now that we have QName literals, we can use them in other places as well, and it's very nice to use in annotations because you can now use binary in annotations and QName literals as values. Yeah, as new literal values. Okay, declared context value here. You see this. If I run this, it tells me all the people in the room. But if I remove that entirely, it will still have a context, but it's just empty. So if I now do add an ID here, that's wrong. It should return empty. Yeah. Okay. 1 minute. So I give you one like enums and arguments or a full-blown example of how a record could be used together with enums. So I have a record, and then you can look them up. They are all in there. There's a record that has width and length and also a unit, and it can compute its own area, but it also can be converted to a different unit, and using that factor function here that works only on units. So if you give it something else, it will give a static error. I think I will yield my time to John here, but you would have now like one question. There's one question?
No, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, no. I was like bidding at a thing when I was scratching my nose.
Yeah. There's one interesting thing would be that you can now, with records, you can wrap the random number generator, where I think I'm the only one using it. It feels like, because it's too cumbersome for others.
There was a question in chat.
Ah, okay, cool.
About try catch finally. It says, sorry if I got things wrong, but how can $I be visible in the finally block? That's why I asked the can you go back to this slide? Yeah, this one. You see the I that has been defined in the let in the try. So that's why I asked if the error description can be seen in the finally train and bound and same.
No. So what is bound in the try can be used in the finally, but I haven't tried error.
Compared to like Java and other things, that would be completely out of scope.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. A lot to discuss, I think, but not enough time to do that. John, please. I hope you have enough time. Until when do we have? Yeah, I need to stop sharing. Until when do we have time? How many minutes? Did you hear that? 25.
Yeah, that's fine. We're not going to get through it all anyway, so don't worry about it. Okay. Right, can you see me all? Can you see it? Yep. Can you hear me? Yep. Okay, XSLT 4. The main features are basically syntax additions to make the code terser, enhancements to the type system to allow expressive constraints, building on the stuff that you in parallel effectively with the XQuery stuff. Type-based pattern matching, which is sort of not, it's pretty much sort of done, but it's a bit strange. You have to think about that one. Some more additional functionality for processing arrays. But as far as streaming is concerned, it's been split from the main specification. It was always effectively optional. It took an enormous amount of stuff and it's been split off into a different thing. And Mike did a fairly stellar job of basically refactoring that a week or two ago. Okay, let's start with some simple stuff. They've put some interesting little bits of documentation development aid in. The first one is that a style sheet can have a main manual attribute, which basically can be used to point to where it thinks the top of this of its context is, and that's basically an idea to be picked up by IDEs that can pick it up. The next one is nice. It's basically you can now have an XSL note child, which is effectively can have structured content inside it, as compared with a comment, and it can have anything inside it you want. It can have any attribute you want, apart from possibly ones in the XSL namespace. And you can use that for any purposes. You can read this. You can make a documentation system out on top of it, whatever you want to do. But and they can appear anywhere as a child element. They used to have things, you could put things at the top level in a style sheet, but once you started putting them down inside instructions, they became part of the output, or part of the result anyway. But as far as they're concerned, these are completely oblivious to the XSLT. It's as if they're not there. The XSLT strips them straight out and forgets about them. So that would be a nice bit and piece to think about for when you're trying to do development and things like that. Okay, most of the syntax additions effectively are trying to increase the code density. So in an XSLT3 code, we basically would have something like this, and but the XSLT4 equivalent has basically said, why do we need effectively to have the sequence selector inside here, where we just got an XPath expression? We can put the select up in there. These are places where it wasn't consistent in XSLT 2 or 3 about the use of sequence constructors and XPath selectors. And the slide examples I'm going to be possibly going to be very nonsensical or easier in direct XPath, but they're illustrating what's going on. Okay, let's start with some simple ones. As I said, cases where you've just had a sequence selector with select in it, a sequence constructor with select, and it could be up on the parent, and that's being done. So that choose would look like this. I know you could do it in XPath tensor, but we're trying to get it onto the XSLT. And you've got similar things for map, result document, and the substring stuff. Okay, one other thing that's becoming clear is that the XPath expressions that are happening are basically getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And often formatting is, whilst not critical to the meaning, is really quite important to try for the human to try and understand what's going on. Still, if there are still coders left after the next year. And what happens is attribute value normalization will collapse things and that sort of stuff, and it may not make any difference, but it makes it really messy. So what we've got for that is we've introduced a select instruction whose body is the XPath expression, and that can basically be protected from being rewritten and collapsed and that sort of stuff in your IDEs and things like that. So that's quite a nice way of thinking about it, and it's quite a nice little bit, but it makes no difference to the effectively to the semantics. If and then, we've often had to, when you've got multiples, you have to use choose, and basically you can put an if with a test, and you can put a then and an else when the values are effectively are XPath expressions. And in a case where, for example, you might have had a sequence constructor, you can still do that. You can put the else effectively, if it's an XPath expression, onto the thing and make things much terser. Okay, and we've done the same sort of thing where you're basically trying to test something against a set of different atomic values. Then we can we've got to switch, which from the XQuery into the XSLT. That's fine. Okay, now one of the problem we've got here is that there isn't yet a big, Saxon's working on its 13, which has got quite a lot of that and being used for testing, but it's not being released yet. And Saxon, the browser-based one, certainly doesn't. So what I've got is a system where we basically take XSLT4 code and an input, and we produce a result, but we do it by converting the XSLT4 into equivalent XSLT3 for a number of the new constructs. Many of the constructs actually can be source transformed, except they're probably almost certainly going to be more type permissive than they actually should be. And then we do that conversion and run via an FM transform. But the only syntax we convert in these things are XPath expressions are not converted. But we can produce some equivalent functions in the library, effectively provided in namespaces. And I'll give you and the limitations of this workbench quickly are: the map keyword is still required, the function keyword must be function, can't be fn, and if then else must be completed effectively. But we can have equivalent functions. So if we take the case of for each, it now has in for1, it has a positional in sequence position argument, which is not supported in 3.1. So what I do is make a function which is defined in XSLT, which has the function, the semantics of the thing, has the same signature, but it just happens to be in a separate namespace, and those namespaces are loaded. And in the problems, if there is one of those things available, then it's bound in the names in the style sheet. Okay, let's go on, and we come back to one of those a little bit later. One of the big things, there are a couple of big things in the thing, is the ability to write an enclosing mode. You may have cases where you've got, I use modes a lot, and most people tend to quite a bit, but you have this problem that the templates can be anywhere over the whole kit and caboodle of your style sheet, or a style sheets that it includes or imports or whatever, and you can sometimes spend hours trying to work out why this thing's happening. So what we're doing is something that was thought about in actually in 3.1 and 3.0, but didn't make a cut, is that we can put templates inside a mode. And what happens is that the mode becomes the mode for matching, and in fact it's the only mode for matching. You can't put a mode in there, and it becomes the default mode for applying templates. So it basically makes a sort of micro package in terms for the template things. And there are some implications. The template match, there must not be modes elsewhere in the package that match that template, are in that mode, and only template modes inside the mode are applicable. Even all outside will not apply, and that's one of the things in the emulation we've got that isn't supported. All will actually pay, but I mean, I've used all perhaps about 6 times in my professional career at the moment, and most of the time it's you name the modes that you want to deal with. Okay, there is an example on enclosing modes there where it's all mixed up and you put it back together. You can try that yourself. The other one is effectively, I said, in XPath, the functions have optional functions and parameters. We're doing the same effectively in XSLT. We'd normally have to triple arity function, or we'd have to basically cascade a sequence of the different arities. But in XSLT now we can basically say the functions are required and what their default value is, or what their default, they could be a sequence constructor. And that's rather nice because it makes things much simpler. The next one we got is once you start using functions with maps and function signatures and all sorts of stuff, you start to get these enormously long strings of things, and they have to be written everywhere and everywhere and everywhere. So the obvious thing is have an item type which allows you to basically name that, which means of course you can put it in one place, and you can, if you need to change the function signature, you can change it in one place and it changes everywhere else. Quite simple, nothing to do with it there. We also have, as Juri said, there's record types, and we've got record types effectively in XSLT as a structured piece. And it will also, can be, I think this may be default, I'm not sure, it will produce constructor functions. So the static context will produce a function, will have a function which is a constructor for that. So if we do that, then we will end up with one real and I giving these 2 values from complex. And we also have record type names. Actually, it's the same, the 2. Oh yes, right, let me go back. Previous. Okay. We also have the ability to basically write a constructor instruction, which says, I want you to produce a record or a record whose R value is this expression and whose I value is that expression, and that has to be the name, and there's the name of the key, and that has to be expression evaluated in the current context. But there's a small issue here. We don't want to restrict what the name of these fields are. So, for example, to support as a field, we cannot use as the type of this record, and we have to put them in XSL space. And this is this is an exception, it's the only XSLT instruction where any standard attributes must be in the XSLT namespace. In all of the others, they must in no namespace at all, just to give you an idea. But this makes it much easier and more compact. We're now starting to get type-based pattern matching. This is all for leading up to basically being able to do push mode processing of JNode trees effectively. So we used to have to do this with a predicate. We can now just say a type, or for the case of arrays and maps, we don't even need the type. And we basically can do effectively things with records and array records and similar bits and pieces. And these become effectively patterns that we can use in the mapping. But this is fairly new ground for everything. We really haven't started to explore it very, very thoroughly yet. And there are lots of numbers of tests, but I don't think anybody's tried really building some things. Mike K probably has, but that's a different matter. The other one, which I'm finding, I've said the enclosing modes was basically really rather nice. I use it constantly. In fact, I've used it in the construction of these workbenches and that sort of all over the place. One of the other things I've always found problematic is when I've got a name template and I want to call it with parameters, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So what we've now done is if the template is in a namespace which is an extension element prefix, then you can basically just write you can have an extension instruction which basically calls that template, where the values of the attributes are taken to be are checked against the type of the parameter that you're trying to call, and depending upon what that type is, they will either be effectively cast to atomics or the appropriate type, or they will be executed as XPath expressions. And what I'm going to do now is, have we got enough time? No, I think you'll have to try this one yourself. There is let me go. Okay, there's an example extension instructions, which basically you can explore this where you want to where you can basically explore putting these and using these extension instructions to basically make a nice little bit of code, like dense code, calling those templates. Right, where are we? Okay, we're all used to having this entire menagerie of repeated namespace bindings in the top of the style sheet, and forgetting them, or having to go and copy them, paste them from somewhere else, or relying on your IDE. Well, now we've got a thing called fixed namespaces, where you can put in hash default will load all the usual suspects, and you can put some other you can put other bindings in there yourself if you want. The only thing you've got to be careful of is you must define XSL namespace prefix in order to basically, or in order to satisfy XML itself. Okay, as you see, it's the same sort of thing. Here we've got a case where we wanted to basically do some template matching or for eaching, and we want to separate between elements in order to get things like Michael K, John Lumley. And this is just tedious. So now what's happened is effectively the separator, which can be an attribute value template if you want, is that the value of this is put in between as a text node between each of the outputs, effectively, of the each of the elements, each of the items has basically come from the no, it's not each of the items, it's each of the applications of the templates, for example. So that, and you do the same for each, and that's quite a nice little bit. We've got a new thing for for each group, which is split when, which is a bit like the partitioning. It's very similar, in fact. And the example I've given you is exactly the same. It's actually doing line wrapping partitioning by using these groups. There's another one coming for each group, or being examined, which is rather more complicated, but I won't go into that at the moment. And it's the same sort of thing with what's the next item and what's the group so far. And it allows us to do things like this effectively. And there's, as I said, there's an example there. We've got arrays. This is not yet an array instruction. This is not yet finalized, but it's basically if you wanted to produce an array of sequences, it gets a little bit awkward. You have to do this sort of thing. So what we've now got is effectively a for each instruction on the array instruction, and that basically says make an array member for each of these, and for each of, and the value of that member shall be the select instruction. So that basically gives us things like we can produce an array of powers, and then we can look at them out and that sort of stuff. I should say, that's proposed but not yet fully discussed to agree, but I suspect that's going to go in, and it's quite useful for basically the construction of arrays where the value is going to be sequences. And we've got an example you can try out for that. And I think that's about it.
There's a question, John.
You'll have to repeat it. With the introduction of XSLT, is this the one and only use of XPath in naked text?
John, did you understand it?
I think so. Is it the only path, XPath in native text? As far as I'm aware, yes. And obviously, if you can do it by putting it into there and then run the stuff through and evaluate if you want to do that sort of thing. But no, it's the only place where the XPath expression will sit as a text node rather than the value of an attribute.
More questions? None here, and also I do not see which one.
Why did you ask it?
I don't know what it is.
Tom has a question. John, did you see it?
No, I can't. Where is it? In the chat.
What does these selectors mean? No.
To match predicates that. So if you have atomic predicates in XSLT3, you have a dot and a predicate with all those
Yes.
matching patterns. Now that you can do it using the type function,
Yeah.
how does that fit into the priority?
I don't know. I think that we haven't decided the mechanism for default priorities, where that is. And Mike's been doing a bit of experimentation. I think one of the questions is we may be trying to basically wean people off relying very heavily on default priorities in more than the absolute simplest cases, because they get very, very tricky very quickly and sometimes very counterintuitive. So it's being worked on, but we haven't decided what that's going to be yet.
There's lots of more questions, but I fear we don't have time. Yes. What do you say? One more. Peter was first. I'm sorry.
XQuery, the context item is replaced by a context value. How is that for XSLT?
It was about context item and context value. Is there changes in XSLT about? Is it also context value now?
I don't. I wouldn't have thought so. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. We haven't covered. It's mainly been focused effectively in the XPath environment, the XPath and XQuery environment, and that may be where it stays. I don't think so. No, I can't think we've really discussed that yet. Good point.
Okay.
Norm, do you want to say anything? While you're
No, I just unmuted and turned my camera back on so I could applaud you guys for an absolutely fabulous job. It was terrific. Thank you.
oh, thank you very much.
I'm standing on the shoulder of giants, by the way. So a lot of this wouldn't have happened without the enormous support from the community group. Thank you.